the USDJPY, which was another choppy market for us, which lasted about 3 days before we saw the breakdown of that support line. So let's run through how the week has started for us. So I would like to delete all these illustrations so that we can have a cleaner chart to work with. So this is what we have here. So since the beginning of the week, it was a simple setup, obviously, as we saw this old choppy situation, which lasted for about 48 hours in this market. Price was ranging between the 135.300 level and the 135.850 to give us a sign that there is a level of indecision in this market. And you know what we look out for whenever we have this kind of simple setup? We want to see price action either break out of the resistance line for buying opportunity or break down the support line for selling opportunities. And though we had some buy position at the week, which didn't last long, I think we had our first stop loss on Wednesday New York session, which took us out of the buy position, had the breakout of the 135.300. But since we had a sell stop order below the 135.850 to capture the bearish move, we had a sell position triggered there. Now, for those who had missed out on that opportunity, the market gave us another chance to be part of that move as we saw price action come back to retest the structure during the early hours of yesterday to give us another beautiful, is it not, 100 pips move to the downside. And since price action came into the zone yesterday, we have seen a situation here where price action, though choppy, it has been finding higher lows in this market. The next thing I want to be doing right away is to acknowledge the higher lows that we have been witnessing here in the last 24 hours in this market. So if we connect the series of higher lows here, so we have a beautiful trend line. So I would like to emphasize the importance of the structure. So I will make it a little bit more thicker. And let us give it a green color to emphasize the bullish momentum in this market. So going into the New York session today, this bullish trend line here is going to be our yardstick for trading activity. And now the question is, how are we going to be using the trend line in our favor? Now, as long as price action remains above that trend line, we shall feel comfortable in our buy position. If you are in a buy position right now, feel comfortable in your buy position as long as price remain above that trend line. So now, if you are not yet in a buy position right now, then we have a structure here at the 135.850 to be part of that trend continuation to the upside. So a simple buy stop order above this area should be taking us in for that buy position on the USDJPY. Now, remember how important the 135.850 is. If we go to as far back as the beginning of this week, you will see how the 135.850 had been a major determinant of price action since the beginning of the week. During the first half of the week, we saw how the 135.850 was serving as a very strong demand zone. And then during the second half of this week, we saw the breakdown of that level. We saw continued selling pressure around that area. So right now, price action is trading around that area. And I'm of the opinion that since we have been citing some bullish momentum here in the last 24 hours, considering the higher lows we are seeing in this market, and coupled with the bullish trend line we just identified here, I am tending towards a bullish momentum in this market. So with a buy stop order sitting just right above the 135.850, we want to be in for a buy move. Now we have the tendency of having multiple buy positions in this market as we have structures like the 135.00 area. Remember, this was our key level since the beginning of the week. A breakout of the structure definitely is going to be giving us more buy position in this market, so we want to take advantage of this move too as well. Then we also have a structure at the 135.300, which happens to be the resistance zone for this week. Remember, this is the highest point price action has ever been for this week. Now, if a breakout of that structure happens, then that will be a sign that price action has finally taken out all the sell position in this area. And then if possible, we see signs of much liquidity for buyers here, which will reflect on the chart in the form of a retest of the structure. Then we could be thinking of adding more position to our existing trade. And one more thing about the structure is that since we have a trend line here, a breakout of that 135.300 could still see price action come back to retest structure, probably back into the trend line, where the appearance of reversal pattern on our lower time frame will be welcoming more opportunity. So as long as price remains above that trend line, we shall feel comfortable in our buy position. Now, like I always say here, like we always do, as long as we look out for buying opportunity in this market, we cannot ignore the potentials of sellers. And the reason why we will not ignore the potentials that the sellers have in this market is the fact that since we saw the breakdown of this demand zone here on Wednesday, we saw how that level has been serving as a strong seller niche in the last 48 hours. And since price action is back into that zone, there is a likelihood that we could still continue to see selling pressure around that area that will incite a sell-off in this market. So if that is going to be the case in this case scenario, how do we intend to take advantage of a bearish move? And what do we want to see on this chart that will give us that confirmation that we are going to be having a shift in our buyers from bullish to bearish? Now, if you look at the structure, if I zoom into the structure closely, there is a simple structure here around the 134.650 area, somewhere around here, which has been a buying niche, which also shares a confluence with both the bullish trend line. Let me show you. So we have the bullish trend line here, and then we also have the bearish trend line since the beginning of the week here. So it shares a beautiful confluence here, and I always like working with my confluences closely. Now let's identify a structure around that area which we are going to be using to guide our bearish momentum here if price action ever breaks down that structure. So I have a level identified here, and if you go to as far back as yesterday morning, you will see how that level had been a major determinant of price action. Look at it here during the early hours of yesterday. It was serving as a selling niche. We saw it here too as a selling niche before the breakout of the structure happened during the early hours of today. And right now we saw buy pressure resume around this area, which was a sign for me that we are likely going bullish. But at this point, we want to consider the potentials that sellers to have in this market. So with the 134.650, let's label that area out. So 650. A breakdown of that structure definitely will be welcoming a selling opportunity in this market. And look at this whole structure closely. You will see that if a breakdown of the 134.650 happens, price action would have also broken down that trend line, which would have been a sign that the trend line may no longer have the capacity to continue to hold that momentum to the upside. And if that is going to be the case, then we would have no other choice than to get ready to sell. So if price action drops down, I would advise that we scale down into our lower time frame. It could be your 10, your 5 or 50 minutes time frame to look out for retest of either the 134.650 or this trend line to look out for selling opportunities to join that bearish move to the downside. So this is the only reason we want to see in this market that will give us the idea of selling the USDJPY for today. So I hope that we be on standby to catch any of these opportunities when they finally happen. So for buy position, I told us all that we are having a buy stop order above the 135.850. And for selling opportunities in this market, I told us we want to be seeing a breakdown first of all, retest of structure in our lower time frame before being part of that move to the downside. And the sell expectation in this market also has a tendency of giving us multiple entries, as we have structures at the 134.400 and the 134.00 area, where a breakdown of the structures will be welcoming more sell position in this market. So I hope we'll be on standby to catch these opportunities when they finally happen. So that is that on the USDJPY for today.